Alright, today we will be looking at Unit 6, Section 4, finding inverse functions. So the objective, the student will be able to find inverse functions algebraically. We do have some steps for finding inverse functions. There's 4 steps. You change f of x to y. You switch your x and y, so like trade places. Then you solve for y. After you solve for y, you change y to f of x to the negative 1 power. This negative 1 power right here, this means inverse. Okay, just like when we used sine, cosine, and tangent, and when we needed to find a missing angle, we used inverse sine, inverse cosine, and inverse tangent. Okay, so all that negative 1 means is, hey, this is an inverse. Alright, let's go ahead and get started. So it says, find the inverse of each of the following. We have example 1, f of x equals 3x. All I'm going to do is follow the 4 steps above. So step 1, change f of x to y. Okay, so instead of f of x, I have y equals 3x. Next, we switch x and y, meaning we trade places. So y is going to become x, and x is going to become y. Now, step 3, solve for y. So get y by itself. Okay, so I'm going to get y by itself by dividing both sides by 3. These will cancel out, and now y will be by itself. Y is going to equal x over 3. Okay, last step is to change y to f of x to the negative 1 power. So I have x over 3 equals f of x to the negative 1 power, and this is my inverse function. X divided by 3 and 3 times x are inverse functions. Example 2, same deal, follow the steps. So instead of f of x equals 1/2 x, I'm going to have y equals 1/2 x. Now I'm going to trade places. Y will become x, x will become y. So x equals 1/2 times y. Now I need to solve for y. To solve for y, I need to get y by itself. So as I read it here, it says x equals 1/2 times y. I need to get rid of the 1/2. Okay, so to get rid of a half, since 1/2 is like dividing by 2, I could just multiply both sides by 2. 2 times 1/2. I'll just put it up to the side so you can see it. When you multiply fractions, you multiply straight across, so this would become 2 over 2, and that would cancel out and become 1. So this will cancel out with that, and it leaves me with y on the right side. So I have 2x equals y. Now all I have to do is change y to f of x to the negative 1 power. So I have 2x equals f of x to the negative 1 power. Example 3. We're going to start like we always do. I have y equals 4 over 3x plus 5. Now I'm going to switch my x and y. X equals 4 over 3y plus 5. Now I'm just going to move everything away from y. The first thing I have to move is that 5, because it's out there on its own. So I'm going to subtract 5 from both sides. I have x minus 5 equals 4 over 3 times y. To get rid of the fraction, I have to move the denominator first. So to get rid of that denominator, I'm going to multiply both sides by 3. Now when I say both sides, I mean the entire side. Okay, so we have to put x minus 5 in parentheses. On the right side, though, these 3's will cancel themselves out. And I'm going to have 3 times x minus 5 equals 4 times y. Now the last step would just be to divide by 4. And I have y equals 3 times x minus 5 divided by 4. The last thing we're going to do before we switch is distribute. And then we're going to change y to inverse f of x. All right. Just going to draw a line so we know that's part of that example. Okay, example 4. F of x equals 1 divided by x plus 3. Okay. So I have y equals 1 over x plus 3. I'm going to change my x and my y. X equals 1 over y plus 3. Now my job is to get y by itself. Y is in the bottom of the fraction, so to get rid of a denominator, I'm going to multiply both sides by it. So I'm going to multiply both sides by y plus 3. Okay, and it's going to be kind of smushed over here, but just know that that's what's happening. Y plus 3, and I'll rewrite it right here. So I have y plus 3 times x equals, these cancel, 1. So to get y by itself, we got to move pieces away. The first thing I would move is x, since it's on the outside of the parentheses. To move the x, I would just divide. So y plus 3 equals 1. If I can write a 1 divided by x. Last thing is to get rid of that 3, and we do that by subtracting 3 from both sides. And these will cancel, and I have y equals 1 over x minus 3. Oops, I'm going to need to move that. Y equals 1 over x minus 3. The last thing is to trade y for inverse f of x. And there we go. Okay, we have 2 more examples to look at here. Example 5, f of x equals 1 over 2x to the 5th power. So now we have an exponent. We haven't seen that. So we have y equals 1 over 2x to the 5th. I'm going to switch my x and y values. So x equals 1 over 2y to the 5th. Then I'm going to start to get y by itself. So again, y is in the bottom of a fraction. It's in the denominator, so I'm going to multiply both sides by that denominator. So I have 2y to the 5th times x equals 1. Now I'm going to move things away. I'm going to divide by x. And I have 2y to the 5th equals 1 over x. Now I'm also going to divide both sides by 2. So I have y to the 5th equals 1 over 2x. Then I need to get rid of that exponent. I need to get rid of the to the 5th power. So to get rid of something raised to the power of 5, I need to take the 5th root. Okay, the 5th root of both sides. So this will cancel with that, and it leaves me y. So I have y equals the 5th root of 1 over 2x. Last thing to do is trade y for f of x to the negative 1 power, or inverse f of x. And there we go. Example 6. Okay, it's kind of like example 5. Trade places, or trade f of x for y. Trade places with x and y. And then get y by itself. We're going to start by moving it out from underneath. And then we're going to move stuff away from it now by dividing. Then I'm going to get rid of that exponent. And since I'm raised to the 3rd power, or I'm cubing y, I'm going to take the cube root. So I have y equals the cube root of 1 over x. And then just trade y for inverse f of x.